Welcome back to the technical track. For anyone who doesn't already know, I'm John Knowles, CTO at JH, and more importantly, your technical track host for today. Our next speaker is a web solution consultant at Google. Site performance has always been critical, but now more than ever, there's a pressure to deliver the best possible experience to our customers. To help you along your performance journey, I want you all to welcome Gilberto Cocchi on Web Vitals, Essential Metrics for a Healthy Site.
Thank you, John, and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining this session around Web Vitals. So as John said, I work in Google as web solution consultant, and my passion is really web performance. Web performance, speed, and also other related Google products such as New Chrome API, AMP, and Progressive Web Apps. If you're interested, you can find me on LinkedIn and Twitter, but I collaborate in Google with lots of speed tools that we're going to talk today. As you may know, Google is not new to speed toolings, but I'm here to talk about the latest and changes that we've done across Google on web performance, Web Vitals. Web Vitals is an initiative led by Google to help business owners, marketers, and developers identify opportunities to improve user experience. This initiative is meant to simplify the performance metrics landscape, and I'm sure you agree that it's quite complicated and convoluted, not always easy to navigate, both for technical and non-technical expertise. And with these initiatives, we want to focus and help sites focus on the metrics that matter the most, the core Web Vitals. We believe that the core Web Vitals are relevant to all web pages and every kind of site. And core Web Vitals represent the best available signals have today to measure the quality of experience on the web. But we appreciate that these signals are not perfect. Therefore, future improvements and addition will come. But before going into the metrics, let's take a step behind in the science that we run in Google in order to define these metrics. And we first started by studying different aspects of the UX, which matters for a good user journey, a good user experience. The first aspect that we're going to talk is the loading aspect, which relates to the interruptions that the user may experience while navigating between multiple pages. We, of course, knew that there are many different discrete metrics such as TTFB, FCP, which correlates to interruptions due to waiting. And these kind of metrics and experiences are really critical in order to provide to your users a good user journey. The second aspect that I wanted to talk about, it's the one that relates to the errors that your site may cause or the users may face from low responsiveness. And this is also critical because delaying something that the user may expect to be instantaneous may lead to critical errors. A really simple example, I'm sure that you agree, is the add to cart button and how users may expect this to really react instantaneous. And if the user and the UI doesn't respond to the user input in a good amount of time, this may cause the user to click twice on the button and maybe cause some API inconsistencies and things like that. And finally, the third aspect that we wanted to cover with these metrics, it's something which is not related to performance in terms of a numerical metrics, but more in the what we call it the visual stability, or how actually your sites manage to load in a delightful way, and all the components that the page are loading, they render, and also how they become interactive. And these that you can see in these slides are the 2020 Core Web Vitals metrics: LCP, FID, and CLS. All of these metrics are included in W3C standards and WICG standards, and they focus respectively on the three UX aspects that I mentioned before. All of these three metrics are measurable in the field or real-world data to better reflect the real-world user experience. The first metric that I wanted to talk is the largest contentful paint metric that you can see on the left, which measures the loading performance. And to provide a good user experience, LCP should occur within 2.5 seconds when the page first starts loading. The second metric, first input delay or FID, actually is really a good indicator to measure the interactivity of a page, and it should be less than 100 milliseconds. The last one related to visual stability is the CLS or cumulative layout shift, and this measures the visual stability of a page, and it should be less than 0.1. We suggest to measure these metrics at 75 percentile in order to make sure you're hitting this target on the majority of your users. And this should be valid across both mobile and desktop devices. If you're curious about knowing more about these metrics, I suggest you to keep a look at these links where you can find all the different APIs under the hook that are allowing the Chrome browser to measure these metrics, and also what kind of study we did in Google across millions and millions of pages in order to decide what metrics to choose, and also the thresholds that you've seen before. Now let's go into details on all of these metrics one by one. The first metric is the largest contentful paint. And this metric measures when the page-to-page navigation appears complete to a user. Of course, we had previously indicators, as we mentioned before, like TTFB, FCP, but we found that LCP is the most impactful indicator to the users. And as the name suggests, this metric reports the render time of the largest content element visible within the viewport. LCP considers different elements, but not all. For example, images, videos, and text, as well as also elements which may have a background image. Of course, there are many nuances about how the container size is calculated. For example, margin and paddings and borders applied by CSS are not considered towards the LCP target size, but it's important to consider which elements might be causing high LCP on your pages. Also, it's good to consider, as you can see also in the slide on the right, there are multiple areas highlighted in the same page. And that's because a single page may have multiple LCPs, because the page cannot know at first what's the biggest element in the viewport. It might actually be something that rendered quite late in the page network for network trace. So it's possible that you will have many LCP elements, but the last one that occurs during the page load will be the one indicating and deciding the LCP score for your page. And from now on, we will call it a related node. The second metric that to consider on the Core Web Vital is the FID, or first input delay. And this metric, it's really great to measure the interaction within the page until the user actually, from the user, first interact within the page until the time when the browser actually is able to respond to that interaction. You may think interaction is always immediate after the user try to interact on the site, but it's not always the case, because these kind of delays may happen for many, many reasons. One of these reasons may be that the browser may be busy on the main thread executing something else, running some JavaScript task. It's also possible that a delay may be caused by not only JavaScript task, but maybe a JavaScript library being called late in the page load, because it's when you download a JavaScript file, as you know, there is also the JavaScript parsing and the JavaScript execution. And if a file might be quite large, it may impact the first input if it happens in that amount of time. On the right, you can find exactly this example. As you can see, the user tried to interact on the main thread where it's busy. So the page cannot respond to the user interaction until the JavaScript long task is completed. We also notice that long first input delays typically occur between the FCP or first contentful paint delay, first contentful paint time, and TTI or time to interactive time. So we really suggest you to look at between these time intervals, which might be really critical in order to deliver to your user the best user journey and user experience. The third metric I wanted to talk about is the CLS or cumulative layout shift. And this is a metric that measures the sum total of all the individual layout shift scores and from every unexpected layout shift that your page might have. It's also good to consider that these layout shifts may happen at the beginning of your page loading, but also they will be calculated for the entire lifespan of your page. But let's go down and break down what a layout shift it is. I mean, you can consider layout shift when any visible element change its start position within the viewport between two frames. And the scoring is actually calculated by two measurements. One is called the impact fraction, and the second one is called the distance fraction. The impact fraction measures how unstable elements impact the viewable area between the two frames. And you can see here the example on the click me button, how it's not impacting itself from the start position, but the green area is actually shifted because of that. The distance fraction is the second element into the CLS scoring calculator and measures the distance that unstable elements have moved relative to the viewport. So again, if you see the example on the right, at the beginning, there is no click me button, and then the click me button gets added to the DOM. So it actually doesn't change its start position. Although the second element, the green text, the green background text, is impacted by the fact that the click button has been added to the DOM. And overall, the CLS score for this page will be of 0.07. Of course, it's possible that pages may have user-initiated layout shifts, and they're not always bad. If they are not always bad, if they manage to happen with quite close to the user interaction. And for this purpose, the cumulative layout shift reporting API allows to actually detect whether a layout shift happened within 500 milliseconds since a user input. If you look at the API on web.dev/CLS, you can find that there is a flag called add recent input flag that will allow you to do like some calculation and exclude layout shifts which happens really recently into the user input. Of course, there are other metrics that are important, and we summarize some of them as other web vitals. You can consider other web vitals that are non-core as metrics that helps you diagnosing and troubleshooting issues on the core web vitals. One example is the metrics that we discussed before, I mean TTFB and FCP. Both metrics are vital aspects of a loading experience, and they may be useful for you in order to diagnose and troubleshoot LCP-related core web vitals metrics issues. Similarly, for the FID metric, it's possible to look at other discrete indicators such as TBT or total blocking time or TTI or time to interactive. These are really strong lab metrics which might be helpful for you in order to diagnose FID or first input delay related interactivity issues. Okay, I mean, this metric sounds really interesting from a technical point of view, but what's the impact? So, well, I mean, we done some research in Google and we analyzed millions and millions of page impressions. And we found that if a site meets these thresholds, users are 24% less likely to abandon page loads by leaving the page before a first contentful paint event is painted. If you're interested about more on these stats, I suggest you to check on our article on Chromium blog, the science behind Web Vitals. For example, the 24% stats that you can see here, we saw it more relevant on shopping sites, where, for example, a news site, it was 22%. So I believe it might be quite relevant for your kind of sites. Also, on top of releasing articles and metrics, I also wanted to announce that Google Search recently announced an upcoming search ranking change, which incorporates page experience metrics. Between these page experience metrics, they will include core web vitals, which together with other signals will provide an holistic picture of the quality of a user experience page. If you're curious about knowing more about the plans of the Google search, I suggest you to check on Webmaster Central blog, where you can find like timing, which is TBD for the moment, also to be mindful for this COVID lockdown coronavirus situations. But you can also find this blog will be helpful in order for you to find relevant updates when the announcement will come. So we run through all the different metrics and the science that we put in place in order to define the metrics that we believe are the best in order to deliver your user the best user experience. Now, we'd like to go down into the tooling section in order to run through all the different tools that we have provided in Google, see how we updated them and how they might be helpful to you depending on the different level of troubleshooting or redesigning sites or project that you're running on your sites. These updates are pretty fresh. Actually, we updated all the Google Speed tools exactly by end of May. We announced that all the Google's popular speed tools now supports the measurements of core web vitals. And I will be happy to run through all of them one by one. It's not obvious to look at one or the other tool because there is no perfect tool for everything. Some are really good for lab data, some are really good for field data, some contains both. So I believe it's really important to check on the nuances of each tool and know how to read data carefully and where on what tool you should look at depending on if you are a developer working on a local environment or if you're looking for long-term impact of your changes. The first tool I wanted to talk about is, of course, the HPD Insights tool. And we both updated the site as well as also the HPD Insights API. You may have noticed that now the HPD Insights site includes the new sections, which have been updated with the Core Web Vitals. You can now find the Core Web Vitals field data, so the real world data coming from CRUX, Chrome User Experience Support. And you can find like all the different core web vitals together also with the web vital FCP. We highlighted the number in seconds, which is the 75 percentile value in seconds, which we can split between desktop and mobile. And also you can find on the bottom the complete refreshed look of the lab data part, which of course features Lighthouse 6.0, which we will discuss later. If your site or page managed to meet the Core Web Vital threshold, you should see a blue ribbon, as you can see on the screenshot on the right. And related to the field data, all of this data for field data are coming from Chrome User Experience Report, as we mentioned before. And this is the room tool on Chrome. We updated the Chrome User Experience Report data in different ways. First, in BigQuery, where you can find like materialized data sets, where you can extract 75 percentile values at origin and month level of your sites, which might really be really handy if you want to compare your site against another, or if you want to check like long-term impact on your site on performance trends. But if you are in a rush, I suggest you to check on the brand new CRUX dashboard. You can find the link on the left. And it takes only 30 seconds to create a dashboard in Data Studio and take a look at your origin performance between month by month by device and on all the metrics that are related to Crux, not only the Core Web Vitals one, but also with the Web Vitals. On top of this, we also announced a new tool called the Crux API, which is quite similar to the PSI API, but it allows you to kind of integrate in your development workflows an inspection of different origin and URL level data on Core Web Vitals. On the Crux API, you can find like all the Core Web Vitals plus the FCP, and it's exporting the last 28 days of time interval window. But it's really peculiar because you can check URL level data on the Crux API, where on BigQuery, as you may know, if you're not new to Crux on BigQuery, you can only look at the whole domain. You cannot really go into deep dive on a single URL. The same kind of granularity is also provided in Search Console. We launched the new Core Web Vitals report in Search Console, which exactly includes data coming from Crux. The only difference with data that you're looking for Crux is that is of course split by device, desktop and mobile, and also by URL. But if we also did an extra effort in order to regroup similar URLs which might be affected by the same issue on Core Web Vitals metrics. Of course, we didn't just worked on the public-facing site speed toolings, but also the really technical ones integrated into our Chrome browser. Chrome DevTools, of course, we worked a lot on Chrome DevTools, especially to try to empower all the different debugging information helpful for developers to troubleshoot and find how to optimize on Core Web Vitals. An example is the new experience section, which is actually meant to allow developers to more easily find layout shift related issues. If you run an audit on a page, you will see you're already able to see the experience section in the latest version of Chrome Stable, where you can also find like all the different indicators that we discussed before, like the impact fraction and how the different layout shifts are actually impacting the score. Another useful tip in order to be able to find to analyze and troubleshoot cumulative layout shift on Chrome is to use the run command show layout shift regions, which forces the browser to highlight any element which is causing unexpected layout shift. Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot to add that on the Chrome DevTools, we also added some calculations for other related known Core Web Vitals, which are Web Vitals helping for Core Web Vitals, like the TBT or total blocking time. How should I know? How should I forgot this? It's not, you can now find information not only about the TTI or time to interactive time, but also total blocking time, which should help you inspect and troubleshoot issues related to the first input delay on the field. And of course, we run through the complete reshift and redesign of Lighthouse with version 6. If you have time, I suggest you to read the Lighthouse What's New 6.0 article, where you can find all the different changes that we delivered with the version 6. It's not only related to Core Web Vitals, because there are also different kind of performance scoring weights which change it, and also new powerful indicators and helpers in order to help you troubleshoot Core Web Vitals. An example of these helpers is the fact that in Lighthouse audits, now we highlighted what's the related node for the LCP and also the different nodes that cause layout shifts. So if you run a Lighthouse report, you should find all the relevant information in order to define what kind of parts of your page, no matter as first or third party codes related, are causing issues with Core Web Vitals. For example, on largest contentful pane, we've seen that quite often it may be caused by large images. So if you look at either Lighthouse or Chrome DevTools, as I'm showing here, you will be able to find that highlight on the LCP timing, the related node target, and be able to kind of prioritize the appropriate work in order to improve LCP timing. On images could be like resize your images, but it's not always the case. It depends a lot on how your site is done. Lastly, we also released an update to the Lighthouse CI continuous integration module. And this fuels the Lighthouse V6 release, which also includes all the core web vitals metrics available in order to be able to appreciate, even if you're in your local development environment, whether there are some early regressions of improvements. These, of course, are super critical in order to avoid a regression before going to production. And it's really easy to integrate this into the mindset of a performance budgeting, together with resource size performance budgeting, or maybe as metric size performance budgeting on core web vitals or also on non-core web vitals. On top of updating all our existing tools, we also developed some new tools in order to help you quickly inspect and find out whether a page is meeting the core web vital thresholds. We released on a Web Vitals JS library, which is a really easy to use library in order to be able to capture this LCP, FID, and CLS metrics scoring within your page and being able to record with your favorite analytics provider. If you want to take a look about how the Web Vitals JS library works, you can also try the Web Vitals extension, which we recently published in the Chrome extension store. This extension allows you to quickly test on a page. And depending whether you're testing mobile and desktop or with different network throttling, you can appreciate whether the page is actually meeting the core web vitals according to the lab test modalities. You can find here a really simple example about how the metric it is, the JavaScript library, how it's made. And it's, of course, using promises. And if you resolve the promises, you will be able to get the value and decide either to use it for local debugging or to report with your favorite analytics provider, as mentioned before. Thank you. I think we discussed everything about core web vitals and the metrics. We ran through the metrics definition, the science behind what we did in order to define these metrics. And I really hope you enjoyed this training, also covering all the different tools. Woo, it has been a run, but I hope you find it really helpful. If there are any questions, I will be happy to answer here now.
Thank you very much, Gilberto. If anyone has any more questions, please post them in the chat as we're going through a couple that I've got now. So one question I've got is the biggest problem we see face is with third parties being loaded through services like Google Tag Manager. Like Facebook's tracking alone, we're seeing a drop of 14 to 20 points on Lighthouse, amongst other services as well. What would be your advice for trying to mitigate against this? I know I'm personally trying to lobby Facebook at the moment to get them to sort that side out, but what advice do you have overall for third parties?
That's a great question. I mean, it's definitely true that third parties are definitely essential for marketing and business purposes, but also when there are too many on the page, they might pose some serious performance issues. In Google, we work in different ways, both as you hinted, John, working with all the different third-party providers, including the Google-owned ones, like Google Tag Managers, in order to find better ways in order to load these modules. And another thing that we suggest a lot is consider to what level to kind of work to have IT developers to work in combination with marketing in order to find the right balance between third parties that are present on your page, also considering the different performance implications. Because having lots of third parties might also cause third parties data to be inaccurate in some scenarios. what we can do with some, we see that some kind of third parties users, for example, client-side A/B testing might be problematic because it might kind of create kind of a barrier on the first seconds of render blocking content. And we suggest, when possible, to apply server-side methodology for A/B testing. We realize it's not easy, but if done well, it should pay off both to your users' experience journey, as well as also to the third-party data accuracy. But it's a long due journey. We're not there yet, and as I mentioned, we're working closely with many of the third parties that we mentioned, but also inside Google, in order to improve things.
Thank you. Next question. What are the biggest challenges that you see developers face in trying to produce performance sites? We've just talked about one of them, but are there any others that you're going to see struggling with over the coming years?
So I believe that it might sound like back to the basics, but with LCP being the core web vitals, I believe that many sites, having a large view, largest content element in the viewport being represented as images, we kind of put images as the first one priority in order to always make sure they're optimized now than ever, because it's a really easy thing to improve images, but it's not an easy thing to keep them well optimized in time. So I believe that images is the easiest to fix, but also the hardest to keep it fixed in the long term, unless you have like a good CMS integration in order also to kind of check on the right density and retina quality of your images. That's really, really important. I see sites, for example, capping at the maximum retina multiplier, which makes sense to the human eye, and that actually may bring huge impact in terms of SCP impact. The second part is the CLS, which of course is kind of a new metric because it's not like a pure IT development metric, but some metric which I believe should involve also discussion with the UX counterparts of your companies. Because if UX guys will work together with developers in terms of working towards improving CLS, I believe if the overall user journeys will improve a lot, but it will require some actual additional efforts in order to make sure the experience is stable for users, which before there wasn't always the case, for example, to do this kind of additional things in order to make CLS looks good.
What was the main driving point behind the new Web Vitals at Google?
It's a good question, and it's always our commitment to rightly motivate developers, business owners, site owners in order to improve the web ecosystem. So we worked hardly in order to define these metrics. Of course, as I mentioned before, they're not perfect and they're subject to change. We also have a page on Chromium where we released fixes to relate to these metrics, and expect these metrics to change in 1 year. It's possible that they will change. So the main driver is still the user experience, the overall user experience. But of course, we try to be mindful of the different developers' ecosystems, whether they are small and big companies. That's why, for example, we partnered with big and small companies in order to get a prior feedback about the core web vitals. And we also work with CMS in order to make sure that all kind of sites owners, no matter if they have a big or small site, will be able to meet these core web vitals.
Time for one last quick question, and I'll rephrase it slightly. How would you debug what on a page would be causing a particular performance drop? Like what tools would you use, or like what would be your first port of call?
That's a great question. So I really suggest to take a look, maybe also on the recording on the different on the article on Web Vitals tools, where you can find like the exact sections on the Chrome DevTools, which are really easy for developers in order to find like the culprit on the page of a high score on Core Web Vitals. This is an example that if you run an audit on your page, and you click on the SCP timing, you can find out what element caused an high SCP timing. So I suggest to start with Chrome DevTools. If you already know what page scores badly, on any of the core web vitals. But if you want to get a look at high level, how your site behave, I suggest you to take a look at Chrome User Experience Report on BigQuery, because it gives you a sense about the wall of your site, how it's going on the real field, calculating also how you're using your well-known caching, CDN, etc., which these things, of course, are not appreciated in the Chrome DevTools lab environment.
Thank you very much. Absolutely amazing talk. Really loved having you meet Magento today. We are back.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. We are back in 5 minutes at 11:35 with Carolina from Beerhawk talking about test automation. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Gilberto, again.
Thank you for joining. Bye.